Hello and welcome to Daily Dose Radio, a 5-minute-a-day podcast studying the Psalms verse by verse, recorded here in the dining room of the Bible Bistro, located in Sharonville, Ohio. Hey there, friends. Welcome back to Daily Dose Radio, here in the Bible Bistro. Come on in and sit down with me, and let's have a little Bible study together. 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week, studying the Psalms verse by verse. That's all we do here on Daily Dose Radio, and it's just you and me. So let's sit down together and we'll study the Psalms. And this week and next week we're going to be studying Psalm 35. Psalm 35 is a psalm of David. As a matter of fact, that's all it says in the introduction to this psalm, is just of David. So Psalm 35 is of David, but I'm going to entitle this psalm A Prayer for the Soul, because at least in the first half of this psalm, this week we're going to study up through verse 14. At least in the first half, it's all about the soul. And the soul features very prominently in this. And then in the second half, beginning in verse 15, we have the shadow of the cross in 15, 16, and 17. And then 18 through 28 ends the psalm, and we consider those who are against us, our prayer against them, and then those who are for us, a prayer for them. But in this psalm, at least in the beginning, we are talking about the soul of man. And of course, it's David's soul that he's discussing here. And he has lots of words to say about the enemy. Now, we've already talked about the enemy in Psalm 9 and 10, and especially in Psalm 10. We had our textbook definition of the enemy, the wicked man. And so we come here to Psalm 35. Let's keep that in mind as we read about the enemy who's attacking the soul. So this is what I'm going to read for you this week, is my translation of the first 14 verses. And we're going to see the soul prominently featured. And there's lots of great illustration in here that we're going to see as well. So I've got 3 verses to read today. Let's begin with verse 1. The Lord will strive with those who strive against me. He will fight those who fight against me. Violently take hold of buckler and shield and rise up to help me. Draw out the spear, close up the breach, to welcome my pursuers. Say to my soul, I am your salvation. That's verses 1 through 3 here in Psalm 35. So this is a prayer, of course, and David's praying, Lord, strive with those who strive against me. Now, just as a general prayer, that's a good prayer for David, because he had lots of folks who were striving against him. Saul being the principal. Saul being the principal one in his life that strove against him. He was always fighting or trying to fight David. He's always trying to find him so he could destroy him. And so this prayer for those who are striving against David makes a lot of sense in a historical context. But then as we seek to apply it for ourselves, we understand that it also applies to us. Although we don't have a Saul who's persecuting us, we do have an enemy of our soul. And you'll notice that the soul comes into play. He mentions it there in verse 3. He says, my soul. And you'll notice that it's my soul all the way through here. In verse 3, in verse 4, we have it again in verse 7, we have it in verse 9, we have my soul again in verse 12, and then again in verse 13. So you see why I've entitled this psalm, A Prayer for the Soul. And he asked the Lord, now, strive against those who strive against me. He will fight those who fight against me. And now he's saying this about the Lord. He's going to do this. And then the prayer begins in 2. Violently take hold of buckler and shield. Now, the idea here is that the Lord is in the city. He's sitting in the house, and perhaps he's having a lovely cup of tea and some snacks, and they're just visiting, and suddenly an alarm is raised. There's a breach in the wall, and the Lord, you know how when you violently stand to your feet, you know, your action has taken over your muscles, and you jump up. And it says, violently take hold of buckler and shield. So you get the idea that suddenly now things have changed. It's gone from simple and quiet to the violence of defense. So he violently stands, takes hold of buckler and shield, and David says, "Rise up to help me." So he's imploring the Lord to come now to his defense, draw out the spear and close the breach. The idea here is the javelin or the spear is in a holster, and he says to the Lord, "Draw it out and close up the breach to welcome my pursuers." So the breach is a break in the wall of the city. And so the Lord has picked up buckler and shield, violently done so, rushed out to the place where the arms are. He's pulled the spear or the javelin from the holster, and he stands in the break in the wall because the enemy is going to come through that break. He's going to come through that breach, and David prays, "Welcome my pursuers." So as they come through the breach, what will greet them? None other than the Lord of hosts will greet them. And he's got the buckler and the spear. And they're going to face destruction because as they come through the breach, if the Lord is filling the breach, friend, they're not going to make it through. And then he prays, "Say to my soul, I am your salvation." So, of course, the Lord is our salvation. There is no other salvation. And when David prays this prayer, he says, "Lord, violently take hold of buckler and shield, rise up to help me, draw out the spear, close up the breach, welcome my pursuers. Say to my soul, I am your salvation." I wonder if David needs to hear himself say that. Sometimes we do, Sometimes we need to hear ourselves say, "Lord, you're my salvation." Say to me, Lord, please, say to me, "I am your salvation," because it doesn't feel like there's any salvation for me in this current, whatever it might be. Just fill in the blank. Every one of us can fill in the blank. Say to me, "I am your salvation." Well, all right, join me tomorrow, and we're going to continue this prayer, beginning there in verse 4. Tomorrow we'll read 4 through 6. So I hope you'll join me then here on Daily Dose Radio. Thanks for listening to Daily Dose Radio. For more fresh and delicious Bible studies, podcasts, books, and more, check out the Bible Bistro online and on YouTube. Join me again next time for Daily Dose Radio.